What's up guys? Today we're gonna talk about a not gaming monitor, which is gonna be kind of interesting. Also, Jay's on vacation, so you guys are getting me.
The all-new Frame 4000D PC chassis from Corsair features a revolutionary frame system giving new meaning to the word customization. With features like removable and interchangeable front USB module, motherboard tray, and mid plates, your system can now grow to meet your current and future needs. The front 3D wide pattern airflow panel offers minimal restriction, while dual 360mm radiator support make the Frame 4000D extremely water cooling friendly with closed and open water cooling loops. Modern graphics cards are bigger and heavier than ever, which is why every 4000D comes with an included GPU anti-sag stabilization arm, because nothing is sadder than a sagging GPU. To see the full feature list of the new Frame 4000D PC chassis from Corsair, follow the link in the description below.
So first off, thank you to Viewsonic for sending over the VP2788-5K. Yep, 5180 by 2880, 27-inch monitor for us to check out today. And then we'll go into who this monitor is kind of for, and the differences between a content creation monitor like this and a gaming monitor like the Viewsonic Elite behind me. All right, so let's talk some basic specs on the monitor. It is a 27-inch IPS LCD, 5K resolution, which is 5180 by 2880. Now that seems a little bit much for 27 inches, but it's really designed for the whole kind of macOS's default 200% scale. So it effectively feels like a 27-inch 1440p monitor that's just sharp AF. Like, it's 5K, like 4K, psh, we're past that already, you know what I mean? Give me an extra K. Another interesting thing about the monitor is that it's 75 hertz, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's a little bit better than 60 hertz, but later on we'll talk about why I don't really think that that's much of an advantage for the monitor. And in fact, it might be a little bit of a detriment, ironically, in its primary use case. Another standout feature of this monitor is the fact that it supports Thunderbolt 4. So it really is for that sort of MacBook one single cable setup, because plug it in right there, one single cable, 40 gigabits per second of bandwidth for peripheral plugs, which means that the two USB 3 ports on the back of the monitor are gonna give you full bandwidth if you hook up like hard drives or anything like that. So it supports the monitor signal, 40 gigabits per second for the peripheral ports, and it provides 100 watts of charging power to the laptop as well. So effectively, you can dock the laptop with one single cable, which is kind of nice. It also has another Thunderbolt 4 port as a peripheral port or daisy chain output. So you can hook up another one of these 5K monitors via a single cable to a laptop, which is insane. Another very useful case for that would be to hook up a Thunderbolt dock with a bunch of USB input and outputs and that sort of stuff. So that way you can place your USB ports somewhere where it's gonna be a little bit more accessible and easy to plug in, because reaching under here and trying to plug in a hard drive or something, it's gonna look weird, it's gonna be dangling, it's awkward, you might hit the power button, etc., etc. As far as color accuracy, obviously, it's called the Color Pro for a reason. 100% sRGB, 99% DCI-P3, HDR400. It's kind of set up out of the box to match the Apple displays, like their internal displays on their MacBook Pros. One thing that I think colorists and photographers and anyone that's very particular about color and calibrations are gonna like is that the DCI-P3 and sRGB presets are available, like readily available in the menu and very easy to access. So you can get to a calibrated color profile very easily. So it's got the Thunderbolt 4 port that I mentioned that's hooked up to the laptop right now. It's got HDMI in, DisplayPort in, as well as two full-size USB 3 ports, as well as another Thunderbolt 4 output port for, again, daisy chaining and or using it as a peripheral for like a dock or that sort of stuff. So let's talk about who this monitor is gonna be for. Obviously, it's gonna be primarily for content creation and anyone that's very particular about color and color accuracy, or a Mac user that kind of just wants a one cable, hassle-free desk setup to come home to with their laptop and then plug it in, have a very nice looking, very spacious and high resolution monitor to do, just the regular computer stuff. So obviously as an editor, I'm gonna be looking at the monitor from that kind of perspective where it's like, what sets it apart as in that sort of workflow versus, a standard like gaming monitor like the Viewsonic Elite behind me. So of course, since the monitor isn't for gamers, what really is the difference between a content creation panel and a gaming panel like the Viewsonic Elite? I think the primary difference is going to be refresh rate. Gamers always want the highest refresh rate because that gives you the lowest latency from your input to your eyeballs so that you can be as accurate as you want while you're going 0 and 30 in Call of Duty. Or, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes I want to see my air dribble fail in Rocket League at 240 hertz. Gaming monitors are all about getting the fastest, lowest latency image to your eyeballs without any tearing. That's like their primary focus. So with a monitor like this, what are you gaining giving up that kind of hyper focus on refresh rate and low latency? The biggest thing is going to be color accuracy. Like I mentioned earlier, the DCI-P3 and sRGB presets are readily accessible in the menu. So colorists, photographers, anyone that's doing color sensitive work is going to be looking at a monitor like this. Also, it has HDR 400, so it can do that sort of HDR monitoring. Now, we don't cut our videos in HDR, so that wasn't really that important to me, but at the same time, I am very impressed with the extremely deep blacks for an IPS LCD. I know obviously the camera isn't gonna show it because, again, it's an SDR video that you guys are watching, but just watching HDR content on this panel is insane because it just looks so good. Like I thought it was an OLED at first, honestly, because of how deep the blacks are. And I think a lot of that has to do with the anti-glare low reflection technology. I think that's what they're calling it. The anti-glare coating on this monitor is noticeably better, even than the Viewsonic Elite gaming monitor, which is not a bad monitor at all. So from an editor and kind of a Mac user perspective, what are the things that I'm digging about this monitor? So first of all, like I showed in the intro, Thunderbolt 4 single plug, awesome. That's freaking cool that not only does it carry the signal for the peripherals and the monitor, it also charges the laptop. Like, that's not anything new really, but it's, you know, this is the first time that I've really kind of messed around with a setup like this, and yeah, it's pretty cool. I do dig that a lot. Another thing that I like is that out of the box it's plug and play with macOS's default scaling of 200%. So window sizes aren't weird when you're dragging them between monitors like the laptop and the actual display. From an editing perspective, another crazy thing is that this window is almost a full 4K size right here, just as a preview window, which is crazy. Yeah, if I bring up this video file, this is 4K, native 4K display. You could be, you know, auditioning like a clip or something like that. You could look at it and then have your notes still up on the same display. It's pretty cool to have extra space and a native 4K thing that you're watching. So that's awesome. At 27 inches, it's 218 PPI, which is just tack sharp. I mean, like if I take my glasses off, even at this distance, like I'm wasting these pixels. they're being wasted on my eyes because, and I don't even have that crazy of a prescription. I think I'm like 1.6 or something, like diopter. So it's actually insane how sharp and clear it is. And the weird thing is that for things like reading text on web pages, it might not really be a thing that you would think about, but it feels a lot less eye strainy because it feels more like reading printed text on paper. Another thing that I really appreciated was a very clean and well-written OSD. Like there's a lot of times where like the OSD tends to be kind of the very last thing that monitor manufacturers are looking into. There's no weird like translations where you're trying to figure out what they really meant by the menu option, that sort of stuff. No, it's all laid out in a clear and easy to understand way, so that's awesome. Also, the monitor has speakers, and the pro is that they are very loud. Like, I know I'm gonna get to the cons later, but this kind of annoyed me because I was trying to turn the volume up to show how hilariously loud these speakers are, but the volume thing goes so slow when you're holding it. Like, look at this. Anyway, yeah, the monitor has speakers and they are very loud. And me and Nick were kind of talking about Me and Nick were talking about the monitor speakers, and I was kind of joking how like they are very loud, but they don't sound as good as the laptop speakers, but just kind of, I mean, it's kind of an edge case scenario. Most people with a full desktop setup like this are gonna have some sort of external speakers. So let's get into the things that I don't really like about this monitor. So I mentioned earlier that the monitor's refresh rate is up to 75 Hertz, but if you notice, I am running it at 60 Hertz. It's kind of weird, right? You would think that Phil would want as much refresh rate out of the monitor as possible. It does say that it supports adaptive sync in its gaming mode, but I couldn't really find that in the menu. I don't know if it's because I'm hooked up via Thunderbolt 4 or if it's because I'm hooked up to a Mac, although it's not a Mac OS problem because the internal display on a MacBook Pro is adaptive sync display. So why not run at a fixed 75 hertz instead of 60 hertz? If your media is not evenly divisible by 75 hertz, which 30 and 60 FPS content, which is basically almost all content out there, except for like the people that try to be all pretentious and filmic and shoot their stuff at 24 FPS. 75 hertz is not evenly divisible by 30 or 60. And so the problem is when you play back 30 or 60 FPS footage on the monitor, which is 100% what I'm doing with it at all times because we shoot at 30 FPS here, it's going to jitter. So even if you don't notice or are not bothered by frame jitter, the point of this monitor is to be a tool that allows you to view the media that you're editing as accurately as possible. And if you're watching, or if you're viewing 30 or 60 FPS content on this monitor and you have it set to 75 hertz and adaptive sync is not working, like in this case, you're going to get that judder, and that's going to be an imperfect display of the media that you are working on. That's why 75 hertz on this monitor kind of seems a little bit wasted. I guess it would be in the situation in which if you're using this on a PC and you do have access to adaptive sync, then cool. You get 15 hertz if you do decide to flip a game on your editing rig and play something on there, but really 75 hertz versus 60 hertz, it's not gonna be that noticeable in a gaming context. And in a fixed frame rate context like this, where you're editing media that is not 75 hertz or 75 FPS, yeah, it ends up being, oddly enough, a detriment, even though it's weird that a higher refresh rate you would think would be better, but no, it actually ends up being a con. And so it is very important that, like, if you are editing, and you need to be viewing that media without any judder, that your monitor's refresh rate is a multiple of the frame rate of the media that you're editing. Another gripe, the OSD joystick and the power button are both concave and they're both shaped and sized exactly the same. Earlier when I was setting this up and kind of using it and getting my my thoughts on what it was like to use this monitor, I kept turning it off and like my windows would just go and like rearrange. Luckily macOS remembers the window placement for every monitor. It wasn't really an issue. I could just turn it back on and then all the stuff kind of snapped back into place. But I don't know if Windows is as good as doing that. So if you're using it on a PC and you accidentally turn it off and you have another monitor, good luck rearranging all your crap back to where it was. Another thing is that 27 inches might still feel a little small for some users.
That's pretty average.
And going back to the USB peripheral ports, it's awesome that they're there, but I think the placement is a little weird. I would like to have seen them kind of closer either to an edge of the monitor, like an iMac, or directly underneath the monitor, but they're kind of recessed underneath, which is a little awkward to get to. Now, I think honestly that second Thunderbolt 4 port is just screaming for slap a Thunderbolt dock on there, have 10,000 USB ports that are just sat on your desk, easily accessible. You can plug in media, you can plug in whatever you need to, and have that I/O going back to the primary computer. So that's the Viewsonic VP2788-5K. For the person that it's really designed for, it is amazing. Great colors out of the box, HDR enabled with one click, and then you have a really nice kind of balanced color profile for both viewing and editing content. And then again, going back to that DCI-P3, all those super calibrated presets are right there in the menu, available for people that actually need to do truly color sensitive work, like photographers and colorists and that sort of stuff. Or, more discerning editors than me. The single Thunderbolt cable kind of laptop dock setup is super low friction and amazing for that type of user. And I feel like there's kind of a lot of people actually out there outside of the whole, obviously, us gamers are kind of in our little bubble of just like crazy mechanical keyboards and giant desktops and 80-liter cases and stuff. But yeah, for the person with a MacBook that wants to just set it down and then have a desktop computer setup type thing, that single cable is amazing. From that sort of a video editor perspective, there's nothing really that I dislike about the monitor. If I personally wasn't as much of a refresh rate snob as I am, because I use a 120 hertz monitor for editing everything, I would probably switch to this just because of the color accuracy and the sharpness of the display. That's just me personally. I know a lot of editors, and even me in the past have done a lot of editing work on a 60 hertz panel. So that was back then when 4K 60 was like the new hot stuff, and it was insane to even get that resolution at anything higher than 30. But the 75 hertz is kind of, it's there if you want it. If you hook it up to a PC and it supports adaptive sync, then the frame judder issue shouldn't be an issue. So of course, you know, the gamer's gonna look at this and be like, 75 hertz, and like what GPU would you even like need to push 5K pixels? Because 5K is an insane resolution for, you know, for a monitor. A lot of gamers use the resolution not to increase the sharpness of the image, but to expand it and make it bigger, because yeah, when, you know, you're not pixel peeping when you're viewing a video game at 120 or greater FPS. So it's not for that use case. Again, the monitor is designed for people to work on media and content and use it as that sort of type of a tool instead of a, you know, a purely viewing content consumption device. Even if you're not an editor and you're just, you know, a MacBook user that wants a really nice premium single cable setup, this monitor is amazing for it. And at around $1,000, it was a lot cheaper than I thought it was going to be. For that sort of Mac user setup, you know, the only display that Apple makes first party is the Pro Display XDR, which is a 32-inch, so it's larger, 6K display. So basically, if you took the PPI of this and then scaled it up to 32 inches, that would be the Pro Display XDR. But that thing is also freaking $6,000. So you could buy 6 of these monitors and you would definitely have more than 6K of resolution to brag about. So yeah, I mean, I think it would be amazing for that sort of, you know, somebody that's a little bit more discerning than just slapping a regular 1440p or 4K monitor on their desk to use as their desktop setup. So yeah, who knew? I mean, you might not have kind of thought about the fact that Viewsonic makes things other than their elite line of gaming panels, considering that's pretty much all we review on this channel, because obviously we're gamers, we love, you know, that sort of like, give me all the hertz and the FPS and everything. Yeah, Viewsonic's been in the game for something like 20 years going on now. I mean, we used to have a Viewsonic CRT back in the day that had the 3 birds on it. That's a deep cut. Also, I feel old now. It's great to see that they're, you know, sort of a professional kind of a workflow type of hardware is just as good at doing that job as their Viewsonic Elite like gaming panels are at being gaming panels. So yeah, like it's freaking awesome. I actually really dig this monitor a lot. So yeah, that's the Viewsonic VP2788-5K. What do you guys think about it? I mean, I know like most of us in here are gonna be gamers, so it's not really gonna feel that like necessarily relevant, but man, it's, you know, I glance back at it and I just see how sharp everything is and how accurate the colors are, and it's just, it's cool. It's awesome technology, and that gets me excited. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, thanks for watching.